Hello, I'm Jude Scott and I'd like to share Abstract Floral from day 2 of my Vibrant Florals Workshop with you. I've got the finished painting there and also 2 images. One is of coloured roses and the other image was in black and white. And that's really good to start with your tonal values so that you know where you're going and how dark or how light to make your colours. I'm using an array of Holbein watercolours there, as you can see, and I'm starting off with some swatches of just different mark making that you can do to add interest to your abstract work or any work that you're doing. So in the first square I've mixed up indigo and I've put a little bit of permanent rose with that, and then I just drag the colour down the block with a dry brush. The next square I'm just going to mask off an area and splatter the work. The one below that I did the same thing. I splattered paint on the paper, but I had sprayed it with water. So there we have the paint has actually sort of softened and splattered around. The green square below that has gum arabic added to the paint. It makes it sit on the surface of your paper. It can be quite glossy if you mix it quite strong. And if you want to do a stamp, where if you come across to the next column on the left hand side, I've used a stamp with gum arabic there. The image above it is just salt dropped into Aureolin Yellow one side and rose madder on the other. And then on the far side I've got some splatter onto damp paper. I mixed red and yellow splatter, then I splattered it with blue and lots of blue and yellow down the bottom, so it's all merged together. It's very wet and it is a great way if you want to do a group of flowers in a scenery, a landscape, or if you just want some splatters to merge. It could be in bushland. It's a great way to get some interesting marks in your painting. The centre column next to that has got just some ways of adding background to maybe the edges of flowers. I've put salt where the white flower is. I've added some salt onto the green that was made from indigo and Quinacridone Gold, and in the top right hand section of that little square I've got some Cobalt Blue. So there's an interesting group of different textures and techniques that you can add to your painting. The one where I put the Aureolin Yellow and the rose madder is great for flowers. It's created cauliflower there by just adding a single drop of water to the paint, and where you've got the two edges merging, you've got dry paint and you've got damp seeping in, and it tends to push the surface of the water across the surface of the paper, and that makes like a little well, and it dries with a very uneven edge, which looks fantastic if you're painting petals. So I'll just do one more demo, and that will be just some mark making just with a rigger brush, different ways that you can add texture, say to a poppy or the veins in a petal. I just need to dry that off a little bit first. So it's great to try different marks, experiment. There's plenty of material out there where you can read marks you can do, things that you can achieve, and if you keep a copy of what you experiment with, you've always got reference material to go back to. So here I'm just painting some very abstract marks. They could be veins in a poppy, and this is painted on dry paper with a very fine rigger brush. And then in the next square I'm going to just spray some water and paint it onto dry paper, and you can see the difference. So here we go. This one's painted on dry paper and you can see that it's quite sharp. So if you think it's too sharp and you're not happy with it, just a gentle mist of water will give those hard edges lovely soft organic looks. If it's too dark, just simply blot it off a little bit with some kitchen paper. So I really urge you to experiment, try out different marks with different colours, different combinations, and you'll come up with probably some real surprises. I don't use a green in my work at all. I always mix my greens. I love Quinacridone Gold and Indigo, make a fantastic green with Holbein paints. You can use Cobalt Blue and Aureolin Yellow and you'll get a really bright spring green. If your green is too bright, just add some rose madder or Quinacridone Red to that, just to knock the edge off that really brilliant bit of green, and you can get some really brilliant results. It's always great to experiment. So now that we've started with some mark making, I'm going to plunge straight in. I've mixed up here Indigo and I've mixed up Quinacridone Red. So these two colours, when they merge together, give you the most gorgeous purpley red. So it's a really bright red. I'm using hot press paper, so the water and the paint are just floating across the surface of the paper. I think there's a bit of shuddering in this video, so I apologise for that. So I'm referring back just to the basic shapes of those roses, and I'm using just the black and white image just to sort of keep the tonal values in mind a little. I'm not slavishly sticking to the image, but this is just a great way to make some different marks. So there I've got mixed up Quinacridone Red, I've got Indigo, and I've also got Cobalt Turquoise mixed up. Three colours that I just love to use together. If you want to warm up the Quinacridone Red, because it's quite a cool red, just a drop of Aureolin Yellow into that will make the most gorgeous red. So on the right hand side, I'm now just dragging that water down, and the pigment, if it's damp enough, will follow down. So into that I'm going to put some salt, just sprinkle some salt onto that and let it work its magic. And the salt, if it's dropped in at just the right time, you'll end up with a sort of look like snowflakes appearing where the salt has been. So now I'm just putting some veins in with a strong Quinacridone Red. I've added a tiny bit of indigo to that just to darken it up a little bit, so it's really kind of a dark purple colour. And the salt sometimes takes about half an hour to work, so don't feel that it has to happen immediately. It won't. It just takes a little bit of time to dry and to evolve, so you can't rush that step of your painting. So just keep referring back to an image, or maybe you've done a thumbnail sketch first, is always a good idea, just to do a bit of design on a piece of paper first. A small sketch works really well. You can work so you can change your mind. You might decide to put more texture or do a different design at the side, and sometimes it's more fun to just try, let the paper and the paint do its own thing and just make it all up as you go along. Here I've dropped in some more, a paler pink at the top, which was again Quinacridone Red, and I've put some turquoise underneath it and sort of blocked in some negative leaf shapes, and just allowing this to sort of evolve as it goes along. I don't know why the video has stopped working. It's sort of really slowed down. So there's not a lot I can do about that at this stage. So while I'm talking you through this, I've decided to add a vase shape underneath the flowers, and I'll link it up. So here I am just putting a vase shape in under the flowers. So just blocking it in with a rigger brush. I've dampened the paper underneath so I can just get that to blur out slightly, and adding some darker stems. I really love the positive and negative shape of these dark stems against the white unpainted background. And you can see the salt on the right hand side has just bloomed absolutely beautifully. It looks gorgeous. So I'm really happy with that. For this dark here, I'm using Indigo and Quinacridone Gold in Holbein, and putting really dark, powerful colours in there. If they're too dark and you think, oh, I don't like them, just blot them off with a piece of kitchen paper. So just mixing up and adding some more darks to that. Sorry about the quality of the video. I don't know why it's gone really slow. I guess if you want, you can always fast forward it. Okay. So the green that's made by the Quinacridone Gold and the Indigo is really showing up there. So I'm just adding a bit of blue to that, and more indigo, just to take that brilliant green away. I'm not really happy with that. So just add a bit of indigo, a little drop of indigo to what you've already painted to take it from green to blue. And I think it needs balancing on the left hand side of the work, because the top right hand section is very dark, so I think it needs some more dark down here to balance it up. So again, using indigo and a touch of rose madder with that to just warm it up and not be quite so intense. And even though these Holbein colours are very, very strong, they will almost lift off your paper back to almost white. It's amazing. It really suits the way that I work. So the background wash of cobalt turquoise is still damp, so those very dark shapes are ballooning out, which I'm not going to worry about those at all. I really like the look of those really soft edges against the very sharp. It's that yin and yang effect that I think makes those marks look really interesting. So I've turned it sideways now. I'm just splattering some indigo across there, and you can see how the salt has crept up and how those strong white dry paper marks on the top right hand side have worked really well. So you can intensify the look of petals just by lifting out with a flat-edged brush. Always dampen your brush first, squeeze the water out, and then you can sort of lift off maybe some edges of petals just to, I guess, strengthen the look of the flower. It's very abstract. It doesn't have to be a perfect flower. It can be however you want it to be. So now going into the next stage, I've decided to put some pattern to link up the two shapes. So I've got a stamp here that I bought. It's a wooden stamp, and I've mixed up, as you can see, some Quinacridone Gold with the Indigo, and I've mixed in some drops of Holbein's Gum Arabic. It's in a liquid form, so you can just drop it into your paint well when you're mixing your paints, and it really makes the colours quite bright. The transparency is enhanced, and they will sit on top of the paper and won't sink in, so you get really vibrant effect happening. And if you like making stamps, you can always spray it with a little bit of water. It will soften the edges, but it'll tend not to shift on the paper. You can see too on the top left hand flower, I've added salt to that, and it has ballooned up the paper, and it looks just like the petals on a flower, but in a very abstract way. And I've left the leaf below it as white unpainted paper. So I quite like that rounded shape that has evolved underneath there, so I'm going to sort of strengthen that look and maybe go back into my pre-stamped area, and I can darken up little sections of that with my rigger brush with some fresh paint. So at about this stage, it's good to just have a think. You don't have to rush into it. You know, if you are not sure where you want to go with your work, maybe you could prop your painting up against the wall, prop it up on a table somewhere where when you sort of go past it catches your eye, and if you've got mistakes after a day or so, you go, okay, I should have put a little bit more dark there to balance this out. I could have put some texture in there. Maybe you need to add another shape. It will come to you, and go with what you feel. Don't try and copy anybody else's painting. Just do what you love, and your style will evolve and your art will emerge. And it's so great to have something that's uniquely your own. It's fine to copy other people to learn how to do a process, but just keep going, because with what you like and how you like to paint, there'll be ways evolving in the future of painting abstract roses or abstract flowers that nobody has even thought of yet. So just keep going and strengthen your ideas and your techniques, and your style will emerge. So that's a much clearer image of what I've been doing. So you can see at the top section there, it's really interesting. Lots and lots of different marks. Here I'm adding some rounded marks over the top of, I've just put some paint on that bottle of gum arabic and pressed it onto the paper. I've drawn some dark lines over the top of those leaf shapes, and I love stripes, I love polka dots on things, so it's fun just to play around. Even at the end of this video, I don't know if that painting is completely finished, so I'll put it up on Instagram when I have finished it. It takes time, I think, for me to look at a painting and think, yes, that's definitely finished. So here I'm just adding some more lines down the outside of that vase, or the vase shape. It's not really a vase, it's just a very abstract vase shape. So when you do these lines, it's sometimes a good idea just to put a drop of a different colour, pigment, or just some water in those lines, and you will see how it pushes the paint again and makes little cauliflower along those lines. Just makes for some really interesting abstract marks. I think it's another thing that is a good idea is to use the same colours throughout a painting. It makes everything coordinated. So I've got the turquoise blue is one colour. I've used Quinacridone Red. I've used some Aureolin Yellow in the red to make it a much brighter red. I've used Indigo, and I've used Indigo with Quinacridone Gold to get my green. So those colours are repeated throughout the painting, and I think it makes it look much better as far as a coordinated painting goes. So you know that your colours will all go together and it will be harmonious. Sometimes you want a complete shock with a splash of totally different colour, but not at this stage. I wouldn't put a totally different colour in. I always work with a limited palette, and then I know that everything will be harmonious at the end. If at that stage you get to the end and think, no, there's just something that's missing, sometimes just a hint of a totally different colour, like cobalt turquoise over red, or a splash of purple over yellow, or in amongst yellow. So just sometimes an opposite colour on the colour wheel can just have a really powerful impact and make your work absolutely sing. This work's probably got enough bright colours in at the moment, but I'll have to still put it up for a couple of days when I've finished and just see what I think, and think maybe it could have a little bit more here. Maybe I need to lift out some edges that need redesigning, or maybe I need to restate some colours. It's just good not to rush these final steps of your work. So I'm just darkening up the base of that little panel of printed work and just running the same green back in over the top of the pattern there that's been stamped on. And I find the shapes there with that negative shape of another vase, possibly another vase, it almost looks like there's wallpaper behind the pot. And it's lovely doing an abstract because there's no right and wrong way. So long as your design is balanced and the colours are balanced, you've got repeated shapes, your abstract will work. Yeah, you can always use some paper, some kitchen paper to lift out anything that's a little bit dark, or when it's still wet, or you can just wait until it dries and you can restate and redefine some of the marks that you've put down. And these paints just lift off beautifully, almost back to pure white paper. So I'm looking now at balancing up the base of the pot and the bottom section of the painting. So abstract usually takes me a lot longer than this. This was done in probably total painting time about an hour throughout the afternoon, and it's really too quick to do a proper painting in that time for me. I take a lot longer, and even when the painting's finished, I'll go back and resolve marks, look at areas, and if anything needs correcting or balancing up, I will do it later, and I'll put the finished artwork up on Instagram. So I've just turned the painting sideways and I'm just pressing down with some more marks. So that I've used Quinacridone Gold and I've used Indigo to make a really rich, warm, dark green. And it's the same pattern repeated, just a little bit more muted than the other areas. So just to get the edges on that to soften a little, I've just sprayed that with a mist of water. So I hope for the participants of the workshop that you can come and look back at this and think, yes, I remember doing that and I wondered how to do it. And it'll just help you to remember things that we've done in the workshop that once you go away you kind of think, oh, now how did we do that? So hopefully this will help you. So again, I apologise for this being on such a slow speed. I can't work out why it's slowed down. It shouldn't have. But as I said in the previous day one video, this is not my forte, but I am trying to learn and improve. But it's a huge learning curve. So you can always turn off the sound, otherwise I'll sound like the chipmunks, and just fast forward it, and it'll be probably at a good speed to watch. So just adding a little more interest there closer to the vase. And I don't think it needs a huge amount of anything else doing to it. Maybe some pink across the bottom, some red, just to have another repeated shade down the bottom, so the red up the top's not isolated. I'll use that same colour across the base of the painting. So when I've finished, I'll put the colours that I've used. They'll be on YouTube in the information section under the video when you go to watch it, so you'll be able to see what colours I've used, what pigments, what brushes, and also the paints and the palette that I've used. And if you want to paint along and have a go at doing this style of abstract for yourself, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So I think that the stems seem to have lightened. They were quite light because they were quite wet when they went down. So the wetter you put paint on the paper, the lighter it will dry. So I've just restated those, and that balances up with the other darks that I've used. And I also need to put some stems in coming down that vase. Or maybe there's stripes, vertical stripes on the vase. It doesn't really have to look like anything, just it's a large white space, so I think I can put some stems or some vertical marks there. So that's done with Indigo and Quinacridone Red. Makes a gorgeous warm dark, beautiful shade. The next one, I've just dragged down the wet stem from that vase, and it was in green. So here we've got the original photograph, the image that I've changed to black and white so you can get a feel for your tones on the paper. Some of that I would like to resolve. You can see I've put pink across the bottom of the artwork just to repeat that painting. Maybe it needs a bit of balancing up on the left hand side, but I'll have a think about that for a few days and finish the painting. Thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and if you want to learn more about tones, look at the video I've got on